Good morning and welcome to another edition of Our Town here on 94.9 and 99.1 The River. My name is Darren Swinson. Our Town, as always, brought to you by Decorah Bank and Trust. A two-guest program, but very in-depth interviews with both of these guests. A little later on in the program, we will talk with Gary Boden. He is the city manager for the city of Waukon. Talking a variety of issues, what is going on in the city of Waukon. But our first guest this morning will be Decorah School Superintendent Mark Lane. We'll talk budget. We will talk the high school principal search, and we'll touch on what's going on with the high school conference realignment. And he will be our first guest this morning. This is Our Town on 94.9 and 99.1 The River. Catching up here with Decorah School Superintendent Mark Lane. I haven't caught up with him in a couple of months. We got to know Mr. Cronin last month as our superintendent conversation took place. Mark, main topic of conversation this time of year is the budget. I know you got the public hearing coming up at your April meeting. When you're putting together the budget, I know a lot of people just look at the black and white of the property tax levy. What is it this year? What's it going to be next year? What does the proposed budget entail when it comes to the property tax levy that folks will be paying?
Yeah, we're looking at for our next school year a property tax levy of $12.36. It's been interesting over the last 3 years since the consolidation of Northwind and Decorah as former districts. We've had a transition period where really we had to stabilize and get to one tax rate. For the past 3 years, individuals in the district that lived in the former Northwind district had one rate, and then people who lived in the former Decorah district had a different rate. And we've watched those rates sort of get closer to each other this current school year. I believe we were at $12.22 for people in the former Northwind district and $12.40 for people in the former Decorah district. And those numbers had gotten closer together each of the past 3 years. And so that we're now to the point where we'll be at one rate for everybody that lives in the consolidated district at $12.36. And that really is formula driven through Iowa code. And you know, at a base level, it's in relationship to the number of students we have enrolled times that per pupil funding. And so next school year for fiscal year 23 to the 22-23 school year, we're really looking at that number per pupil funding right at $7,410 per student. And so we know we've had not a huge decline, but we've had a steady decline in enrollment over the last few years. So this is another year where we're having to look at the fact that we don't have a lot of what we would call new money or growth in our budget. And we'll be going into next year needing to be really fiscally responsible, to think about how we save funds and how we spend funds wisely in light of that.
You mentioned for the last few years, the former Northwind district residents and the former Decorah district residents have been paying a separate levy. Is that a state code when two districts get together? Is that the reason that's been the case?
Yeah, and I don't know all the detail behind it, but yes, I think it's when two districts consolidate, it's rare when those two districts have an identical tax rate. Yeah. And so rather than just reestablishing one new tax rate and possibly having people see a significant increase in their rate all in 1 year, it takes, there's a formula then that allows for some time for those rates to align. And it's taken us getting into really our fourth budget for those numbers to settle in at that 1235. And so people in the former Northwind will see that tax rate go up a little bit more this year. People in the former Decorah will see it go down a little bit, but from here moving forward, we should be able to establish and just have that one tax rate each year that hopefully is a little more understandable for everybody. But I think it's just so it doesn't all happen all at once in one year if there's a big change.
When it comes to school budgeting, you talk about being understandable. I cover this stuff and I have for about 20 years, and I really am not great at understanding it, even though we have these conversations quite often. When it comes to school budgeting, how much money that the district spends year in and year out is mandated money based on programs that the state or the feds require you to have? How much is honestly discretionary spending by a school board?
It's hard to put a percentage to that. I guess I would, probably about 50% of our budget just goes into our general fund, which is probably the money that has the least restriction on it for how we spend it. But of that, a good 77 to 80% of that goes into our staff. And then there are those other categorical funds like our special education funding, our Pebble and Save levy money that comes in. And, I think about it like that money goes into buckets. And so like that Pebble bucket of money, that's really meant to be dedicated to our physical plant and equipment. So when we do things like when we improved facilities at the softball field about a year and a half ago now, that was Pebble Save money, and that's money we can't put into teacher salaries. It's money we can't spend in any other way other than on improvements to facilities like that. And so I would say, about 50% is that general fund money that has a little bit more flexibility, but then a significant amount of money is for professional development, for only special education students, for maintenance of facilities or construction, things like that.
Can the Pebble funds be put towards like the computers that you have for students? Is that part of the funding that could be directly educational based related to Pebble?
Yeah, so Pebble stands for Physical Plant and Equipment Levy. And so, the name really describes kind of what we can spend that money on. Probably some of our bigger expenditures out of that. That's where we buy school buses from. So we've approved the purchase of 3 school buses this year. The 2 smaller buses were right around $100,000. The larger of those 3 buses was more like about 120. So that's coming out of Pebble. That's not coming out of general fund. And then like our one-to-one technology, we updated wireless systems in the high school and some server work at John Klein. And those are ways that we can pay for that without impacting our general fund.
And I know you've raised some concerns about the allowable growth funding that has been set by the state. Did so about a month ago. Another concern that has been put forth by the city end of things is the restrictions that the legislature has put on property taxes and how much basically you can get from property taxes for helping out city budgets. Is that a concern for school budgets as well?
I would say it's an interesting combination because we have seen when that smaller supplemental aid growth has been passed at the legislature the last few years. That has shifted a burden to local property tax. And so our funding formula is really formula driven. And so when we arrive at like that $12.36 for next year, what the smaller SSA rate does, it doesn't change that $12.36, but it changes how we build it. And so it has shifted that burden more to the local property tax payer rather than to just general state supplemental aid, which traditionally has been about 70% of school budgets. And so you're seeing that combination shift between what comes directly from the state and what comes directly from our local property tax. And so I guess it's not necessarily a shift in what we can do. It's more so a shift in just where that money's coming from.
And being the fact that you'll review the budget and hopefully pass it at your April meeting, then your negotiations will be talked about between your district and the district's education association.
Mm-hmm.
If the budget is passed, does that kind of box you in on what you can come to an agreement with the education association with? How does that work in the big picture of all we're talking about?
I guess I would say it's less that it's not necessarily the passing of the budget that boxes us in as much as it is just that availability of new money. We won't see new money. We won't see budget growth in Decorah Community School District for this next school year. Thankfully, we have worked hard to maintain a good financial picture with things like our unspent balance and our solvency ratio. And so, but we do have to be very mindful of when our budget doesn't grow, how do we go about, spending on our priorities? And obviously having quality teachers and quality staff in front of our students and working for our students is our priority. We want the very best people working with our students. And so we have a great relationship with the Decorah Education Association. And I feel like it's a collaborative effort to arrive at, a reasonable settlement and a reasonable raise for people each year. But yeah, I think the circumstances of our budget definitely limit some of what we can do.
Again, I'm going to try to oversimplify school budgeting, and I respect the fact that it's a lot more complex than what I'm trying to put forward here. But you mentioned that there is a slight decline in students, and it's kind of been a steady, slight decline over the last few years. From the outside looking in, somebody may say, if you have less students, shouldn't it cost less to operate a school district? How do you answer that?
Well, I think we have to look at the cost, just the rate of inflation, right? It costs more to gas up our buses. It costs more to put LP in tanks. Electricity costs more, so we just have those general increases. And then the other thing I would say is we don't get to pick where we have those declines in enrollment. And so, if we were going to go down 25 students across the district, if I could say, well, can we have all those students be in fourth grade, right? Then it's easy to say, well, let's make a reduction of a section here. And we did that last year. We reduced a section in third grade because it just wasn't cost effective to have 5 sections. But if you spread those 25 students that decline across 13 grade levels, it can be difficult to find ways to provide the things that we want to provide all students and make right size kinds of changes with our staffing. We don't want to reduce staff in a way that reduces offerings and programs for students. We want quality education. And so we have to be thoughtful and we have to be careful about when we make reductions that they aren't creating a decline in the quality of our service.
So again, outside looking in, would it be fair to surmise that the declines that the district have been small enough that it doesn't reduce a lot of cost as compared to a steep decline that would probably reduce some cost? Is that a fair synopsis?
Yes, yeah, it is. I mean, it's over a 6-year period, our PK-12 enrollment has gone down about 10% over 6 years. And like I said, last year we did reduce an elementary section at 3rd grade in one of our smaller classes. It went from 5 sections the year before to 4. But the capacity to really downsize staff in a way that doesn't have a negative impact on our service is really challenging. I think we're proud of the wide variety of opportunities that we provide to students. We're proud of the class sizes that we're able to maintain. And those are the kinds of things that when you start to lose those as a community, when valued programs, when valued staff members, when things you've gotten used to, when they start to go away, right, people mourn that, or they get upset about it. And it can be hard to figure out, well, why did this happen? Well, it happened slowly. In my former district, we had some declining enrollment, and right before I left, we closed 2 elementary buildings, and that was hurtful to a couple neighborhoods. We had 6 elementaries, and we were closing we had a plan to close a couple of them as we got smaller, and people were frustrated that they were losing their neighborhood school. But it was inevitable. You could see that it needed to happen to maintain a strong, financially viable district. And so, I appreciate that our board is forward thinking. Our business manager, Kathy Dietzenbach, Dr. Cronin, he will be as well. We have to plan for these things 3, 5, and 10 years in advance, so that we can ease, we don't fall off a cliff. Things don't sneak up on us and we say, oh my gosh, how did this happen?
A couple more questions for you, Mark. The high school principal shorts, of course, Kim Shepard, retiring after this year's 20 plus years of service to the district. Where is the search for a new new superintendent? That was taken care of already, but yep. Where's the search for a new high school principal at?
We are holding interviews on Friday. And so I'm excited. Feel like we had a strong applicant pool. Dr. Cronin has been highly involved in our search, and he and I have been communicating quite a bit just around finalists and really kind of assessing individuals within our pool. And so we would right now be planning that we would have a recommendation for the board that would be on their agenda for the April meeting.
And final subject, there's been a lot in the news lately about the future of the Northeast Iowa Conference. I know the Upper Iowa Conference has formally invited some Northeast Iowa Conference schools to join their league. And I know there's a lot of layers to these conference conversations as well. From the Decorah School District's perspective, where are the talks at? What can you tell us right now?
I would say that we're aware that 3 members of the conference have been invited to join the Upper Iowa Conference. We're aware that one of those 3 districts is ready to bring a motion to our conference board, which is the superintendents, to remove Waverly Shell Rock from the Northeast Iowa Conference. And we have not yet set a date to have a meeting to consider that motion. I know that there's been conversation at the New Hampton last board meeting about their invitation to the Upper Iowa Conference, and the idea around a motion to remove Waverly Shell Rock from the conference as a step towards maintaining viability of the conference. And I think, Darren, we were talking earlier, this is another one of those things that for many people, it can feel like, oh my gosh, this just popped out. Where did this come from? This just happened all of a sudden. This conversation has been going on since my first day in the district 3 years ago, and probably before I got here, right? If you remember, probably the second month I was in the district, we received a letter from Mason City asking if they could join the Northeast Iowa Conference. And when you consider an option like that, at the time, I would have been happy to welcome Mason City to the Northeast Iowa Conference. They offer most of the sports that we offer. That made sense for us. But as a member of the conference, we also knew it didn't make sense for other members of our conference. And so at the time, right, the fear was, well, it will just be subtraction by addition. If we say yes to Mason City joining the conference, it's likely that some of our smaller school districts, that's going to force them to look elsewhere. And so with Waverly's continued growth, as a district, they're over 2,000 students. We're the next largest school in the conference. This year, we're at just under 1,600 students, and I would anticipate that we will continue to get smaller over the next few years. And so that distance between even us and Waverly continues to grow. And so I think the conversations that we've had in how to remain viable, how to keep the Northeast Iowa Conference viable, it's been challenging because you have such huge variation from Waverly to New Hampton at just over 1,000 students. And so if you're another Northeast Iowa school district that's maybe closer in size to New Hampton, and the Northeast Iowa Conference comes knocking, if you're a smart superintendent, if you're a smart school board member, your first question is, well, what about Waverly? Mm-hmm. Right? I mean, that's just, you have to be looking out for your district and for your students. And so it's one of those things that I guess I would say, coming to Northeast Iowa from Central Iowa, that I didn't always fully understand and appreciate. It's just an added challenge of living up here in the corner of the state. We have to look harder for good activities partners if we're going to keep our travel time right under 2 hours, and that can be a struggle on a Tuesday night in February, yeah, when you want kids to be fresh and back in school the next day. And so, on our April board agenda, we'll have the Northeast Iowa Conference and current events of what's been happening on the agenda for discussion. And depending on when other districts in the conference have their board meetings scheduled, I know there was a news release in Waverly just recently, just today. I think we'll see more of that over the next couple weeks, and we'll see, where our next steps go as a conference.
Mark, we appreciate the time and the information and the conversation as always. We'll get to do this a couple more times before you head back down south. Always good catching up with you, and look forward to our next conversation.
I think, Darren, one of those last 2 times just needs to be a baseball and music.
I'm cool with that.
Okay.
Well, maybe we need to just make that an hour-long show, and we could have a heck of a conversation
We
there.
could, we could.
I mean, there's always important stuff professionally going on, but life's about the fun stuff like baseball.
That's exactly right.
You and I are on the same page when it comes to that stuff. So
that'd be good. That'd be good.
Mark Lane, Decorah School Superintendent, joining us. Catching up with Waukon City Manager Gary Boden, and we're having our monthly conversation with him right now. And Gary, as we sit here and have a conversation on Monday, the community received some official good news on Sunday that you guys are going to be a pass-through community on RAGBRAI before the final stop this year in Lansing. Never a bad thing to have about 20,000 people coming through town, isn't it?
Oh, no, we're really looking forward to it. And I'll tell you what, if any town needs to have a positive status about being a pass-through, it'd be us, because those poor people are going to go through 3,000 feet of lift in this last stretch. It's incredible how much they're going to be doing it. And most of it is between West Union and here. They got to go all the way down that hill in Claremont and then back up and then up to Postville and then back down again. They're going through the Yellow River Valley twice. Oh my goodness, when they get here, they might be just dead. I don't know how they're going to make it the rest of the way. Of course, from here to Lansing is no big deal, but oh my gosh, those people are going to be going through a heck of a lot for about 35 miles.
That means they're going to be nice and hungry, and I'm sure many community members will have food and drink ready for them to satisfy that hunger, right?
That's the plan. And in fact, I was the city administrator in Bloomfield, Iowa, when we were a pass-through city. And let me tell you, there was a whole lot of activity going on for a period of about 4 or 5 hours in Bloomfield. And we were about halfway between two stretches also. So I expect that there will be a lot of things going on July the 30th in this town.
And being a pass-through community is not like having being a host community, but what type of planning, what type of meetings need to take place to make sure Waukon can welcome all those people and put on as good of a face as the community possibly can?
Well, I think it's going to be about half the intensity, mainly because they're not going to be here the whole time.
Yeah.
But there will be opportunities for vendors both in town and coming through town, because, there'll be a lot of food vendors that'll be following them all the way through. But we're going to have to do traffic control, and there will be extra police that we're going to have to hire for this event and work with the sheriff's department, things of that sort. But again, it's not as intense because there's not an overnight stay situation. Really what this is a place, probably the trickiest part is where you're going to put all the buses that follow the bicyclists. But again, it really is about a 4-hour commitment, 5-hour commitment on the community's behalf when they're here or about to be here. But there will be planning work that has to take place for the next, 2-3 months, getting ready for them to show up.
I know one thing you touched on last week. I know you guys as a city council have been planning a town hall meeting to discuss some future planning for the community and get some community input. And you've asked to push that back a couple of weeks to a date that you can just be a little bit more prepared, a little bit more ready for us. Give us the latest on what you're planning for that town hall meeting and what you hope to accomplish by holding it.
Well, one of the reasons why we pushed it back a couple of weeks now isn't just because of the preparation need, but also to contact folks. We're going to send out very direct invites. In fact, I've already been doing it, talking with people to say, look, you need to show up for this. And then, what we'll probably do as much as anything, review what we got going on and review with community people what we expect to see to happen in the next couple of years. But I think the broader circumstance of our planning effort here is to look, where we're going to be at the end of the decade. And I'm hopeful that what we start at this meeting will be the beginning of having a little broader context, but a little bit more specificity into what we're going to be looking at doing. We know what we're going to see, 23, 24, maybe even to 25. But beyond that, There are some projects that might arc out in funding planning that might arc out to 2030. I won't be here all that time, but I mean, I think that it shows that we need to actually have some focus on how we want to do not only the financial planning, but the fiscal planning of the city as far as how we take those next steps. We know that we got some momentum going here. We know that there's going to be vastly physical changes that'll be noticed in this community in this year. And that will continue on for another year or two. And it's not just fixing streets, it's building new streets, it's building new businesses, it's renovating downtown. But right over the ridge of all of that work, what's next? And, you know, I think we're addressing a lot of things that people have been talking about doing for the next, or have been wanting to have done for the last 10, 15, 20 years. And now we're starting to address those things. So the real question is where do we want to head after that? And I think it's difficult to put together a 20-year plan, to be honest with you. But if we look at this in increments of, say, 5 to 10 years, particularly the first 5 years, it'll probably allow us to plan some of the things that we're trying to do now or will be doing in the short term to get us to transition to that next period of time.
And how important in your mind is it to be open and to be transparent and to make sure as many people invested in the community have a say and are allowed to give their 2 cents in how this community is going to look a decade from now?
You know, I think it's very important. And I think one of the things that we're looking at doing here is directly inviting a lot of people that are on the periphery of our community. And I don't mean that just from a physical standpoint, but on the periphery as far as decision-making, leadership, things of that sort. Among other things, I think we can see in our community that there is a shift, a generational shift going on here as far as who's going to be the leaders and who are becoming the leaders. And maybe in some respects, there's those newer people that are entering into these kinds of roles need a little context as to what's happening right now and what's expected to happen in the next couple of years. But it is very important to get new people, new blood into the decision-making process because they're the ones that are going to be doing it. And they may very well bring new ideas, new attitudes toward this effort. And again, I think part of what's going on here is that for the first time in a while, perhaps Waukon is feeling pretty good about itself because we are making some positive steps. Positive steps that are becoming, I think, a little bit more noteworthy, not just in Waukon, but in our Northeast Iowa region. You know, if you know, we're working on trying to get a lot of apartment buildings built here because we think that there's classically a need for new housing, and that may very well extend opportunities to do more development for single-family housing also. The work that we have done in this community, particularly through WEDC, to build sites for houses, we're pretty much done with that. We got a few more lots left, but there's also a question as to what kind of housing that we're looking to build because nowadays single-family housing is very expensive. And, you know, is there a way that the city could help participate in developing the infrastructure and the ground to make at least some of that cost come off the top? One of the things about a single family house that I've seen in a recent, probably the last 3 or 4 years, talking about what it costs for a house, 41% of the cost of the house is not anything to do with construction. It has to do with the land, it has to do with the water and sewer hookups, the street construction, anything else related to other infrastructures. By the time you get to doing the house building, it's only $6 out of $10. So, you know, if there's anything that city can do to try and turn down a portion of that 40%, is something that perhaps we can do to incentivize single family development. We know that it's cheaper to build here than in fact compared to Decorah, mainly because we're flat and pretty easy to build on. And I know that Decorah is for them to build, they got to go up the hill someplace. So there's more cost involved there. It's not to say we want to rob a market from Decorah, but we think that we're an alternative. And quite frankly, we're not that far from Decorah. I mean, it might be weird to think in rural Northeast Iowa, but we're kind of can easily be determined to be somewhat of a suburb to Decorah.
And have you set a finalized date for this meeting to take place, or is it still tentative right now?
No, it's April 25th at 7:00. And obviously for those who can't attend, it will still be Zoomed. We're Zooming all of our meetings now. So if people want to get access into this, they can do it online. They can check with the city clerk's office on the connectivity, but we'll have that going. But again, we're going to directly invite a whole lot of people and hopefully have a lot of people at the council chambers to have this discussion.
And this will be at the council chambers?
Yes, it will. We'll do it then. And it might very well be the kickoff of maybe one or two more planning meetings on a broad scale before we actually have something set down in writing and to be not just distributed to the council, but to the community.
I know one issue that got talked about last week at the council meeting, Michael Coyle from Veterans Memorial Hospital met with council and said their board of trustees is moving forward with an idea to move Veterans Memorial Hospital to a county-owned facility as compared to a city-owned facility. As for the future of the hospital itself, I know it's right now a city-owned facility. Is this just exclusively a board of trustees decision? Is the council involved at all? Is the city involved in all? What is the city's role when it comes to the future and the decision that Administrator Coyle talked about last week?
Well, to be honest with you, I don't think you find any problem with the city actually allowing for this process to occur. We're very thankful that the hospital is functioning. We're thankful it is here, but understand that the services that the hospital provides obviously goes beyond the scope of the city. And in fact, you find very few hospitals run by cities anymore in this county or in this state. In fact, I think there are 7 at last count, and I think some of those are starting to do what we're doing. The idea here is to recognize that the service base is far beyond the city limits, and as a result, the board is looking at establishing some autonomy, but doing it from the standpoint of recognizing the services that they provide certainly extend beyond Waukon. There is the physical plant that the city has responsibility for that would be extended to a countywide facility through this referendum, which is fine by us. I mean, it seems like everything else that's going on around here, I think the city doesn't necessarily have pride of ownership here. We are looking for better service that's more cost effective to everybody. And as a result, the city is very supportive of the referendum. The pitch was made this morning to the Board of Supervisors at the county across the street from us, and I think that they're supportive. So the idea here is to recognize that what's going on right now is getting formal endorsement from government agencies, recognizing that neither one, the county or the city, actually will be running this hospital if the referendum passes. It will be a separate board of governance that will have their own governmental authority in operating this hospital. It sort of is that way now, but it's still under kind of the Waukon umbrella in a sense. We would be absolved of that responsibility in the future if this referendum passes.
Coming up next Monday night, you'll have a public hearing on your street improvement project for next or for the current year, I should say. How much work is going to be done this year?
We're not going to do as many blocks of streets because the intensity of the construction is going to be greater than what we had on a block by block basis last year. We're going to do finish 2nd Street effectively from 8th Avenue down to 4th Avenue Northwest. We're going to do 2 blocks between 2nd and 4th streets northwest, and maybe do some storm sewer work in there. That's an example of the intensity. And then also do the one block on the north side of the courthouse from Al McKee to First Street Northwest. We also are doing work that will not be completed this year. In fact, we won't do the paving this year, but we're starting to work on doing 4th Street Northwest from 8th Avenue down to the 5th Avenue Northwest. That really will take us more into next year. And I expect that next year's program will have probably a little bit more as far as street lane are concerned. But that's something that's going to have to be determined by the city council coming up, probably 4 to 6 months from now, getting ready for the 2023 project. We have money for 2 years. We passed that ref issue. That puts 2 point. We did last year is going to be in the range of about 1.1 million. And also, what we're going to spend this year is probably going to be 700,000, I think. But we'll wind up spending probably 1.2, 1.4, 1.6 million next year. So it's somewhat of a logistics issue, but at the same time, we're going to take care of a lot of streets. And that's not to say that we're done. I mean, my goodness, we could spend, $4 more million like we're spending right now, or 3.5 million right now, and still not have the problem completely resolved. But at least we're putting a big dent in it. And I think that a lot of people in the community are very positively receiving this program and the work that we're doing. And to say the least, it's well overdue.
Anything else the public needs to know about it, as long as you've got the floor this morning?
Well, I've been getting questions back and forth about what's going on with the where the fire was in downtown on Al McKee Street. And to be honest with you, there's nothing that I have to report. The decision making and the investigation of the fire is with the state fire marshal. That's classically a state responsibility, and we have no information about that whatsoever. And it wouldn't surprise me if it takes another 4 to 6 weeks before we get any kind of report about it. We do know that, for instance, the pet store is relocating 1 block south on Spring, just off the corner of Main Street. And they're going to be open for business in this upcoming month. And the part of the business that was the t-shirt making and antiques or collectibles or, home improvement type of things that were being sold. The t-shirt business is back in place. They're not actually on site, but they're actually still at it. So some of the recovery has occurred. Obviously, the housing that was lost has not been recovered, but there was only, I think, 2 displacements in that. So fortunately, it wasn't too much of a burden on a broad scale basis. Although those people who did have losses, they lost effectively everything they had. So, that was a tough situation to begin with. But basically saying, we really don't know what's going on with that. And it probably won't be until 2023 until we figure out what can occur as far as what could be restored in that site.
Gary, we appreciate the time and the information you provide with us every month. We thank you for the time, as always. Look forward to our next conversation in the month of April. It'll be a little warmer by then, we hope. So
I tell you, this has been a cold March. Can't wait for April.
All right, Gary Boden is the city administrator in Waukon. He joins us once a month. Our thanks to our guest on the program this morning, Decorah School Superintendent Mark Lane and Waukon City Manager Gary Boden. Again, each and every week, with few exceptions. I didn't quite get it done last week, but with very few exceptions, we put these shows on YouTube. So each and every week you can actually see the interesting people we get to talk to on a week in and week out basis. And you can basically, like for today's show, go 3-31 Our Town program. You can search YouTube that way, or we always put these on the Facebook pages of the LA Communications radio stations. Of course, 94.9 and 99.1 The River, KDHK, Hawk Rock 100.5, Bluff Country 103.5, KNEI, and KVIK 104.7. We always put those up on our Facebook pages, but you can search it yourself by searching YouTube at 331 Our Town program. Thanks to our sponsor, Decorah Bank and Trust. Thanks to Mark Lane and Gary Boden for joining us. And most importantly, thank you for tuning in, for logging on, or for watching Our Town on 94.9 and 99.1 The River.